Yeah, I saw this movie last night. I'm sure almost none of you had any interest in seeing this, but I still have to rant about it anyway. It's not a horror movie per se, but I think it kind of billed itself as one, so I went into it expecting it to be one, and I think most people are under the impression. It's one of the sillier films of the year. I don't think it's worse than Tarot. I don't think it's worse than The Strangers. But man, this was still so bad. And what's really cute is that it actually has the old lady from Tarot. So she now has an incredibly stacked 2024, where she has now been in 2 unbelievably atrocious stinkers. And that's kind of admirable. And she plays the exact same character in this movie as she did in Tarot for the most part. The premise is cool. So I actually like the premise. The premise is basically Dakota Fanning, she finds herself in the forest after a pet delivery gone wrong. And she stumbles upon this weird building with these 3 strangers in there. And every night, they have to lock themselves in, and they get watched by mysterious entities on the outside that they can't see, they can only hear. And it lends itself well to some kind of cool mystery. But does anyone care about spoilers? I can't imagine anyone really gives a fuck. Like, is anyone to shake their fist at me? Like, how dare you? If I get into spoilers? Okay, most people are saying no, they don't care about spoilers. If you care about spoilers, my apologies. You can write a strongly worded letter to the manager. So, the film has a cool premise. And about halfway through the movie, probably not even halfway through the movie, they kind of just immediately show their whole ass and they tell you what the Watchers are. And you get to see the Watchers, and they're basically just like these generic tall Slendermen. And it turns out they're fairies. Like evil fairies. And then the movie dives into like actual Tumblr fanfic, where it's like, before the war, there was humans and fairies living in peaceful symbiosis. We coexisted with the fairies together, but we feared their shape-shifting abilities, how they could become us. So we ripped off their wings and we forced them underground and we locked them under a stone. And now, they can't leave this forest because we asked them not to, basically. So, what they're being watched by is fairies that study them so that way they can take their shape better. It's so fucking dumb. This is not Oh, yeah. So it's not M. Night Shyamalan, it is his daughter. This is a Shyamalan family production, basically. And in classic Shyamalan fashion, it's a cool premise that they had nothing good to do with it, past the idea, like the ideation. So let me just start breaking down some scenes for you. So, shit just happens for the sake of it happening without any explanation for why this shit is happening. So it starts off okay because the premise is fun. And then, as things start to unfold, Dakota Fanning is rebellious and she's got a dark and mysterious past. And she decides to start breaking the rules that the old woman has set. One of the rules is don't go into the burrows because that's where the Watchers come out. And she goes into the burrows with the help of this guy. I forgot his name. She goes into the burrows and she sees like bicycles and like children's toys and stuff. And then all hell breaks loose because the fairies start shape-shifting. But they know this. Like, there's no explanation given, really, like a good one, for why the fairies can't leave the forest. They could just walk out of the forest. There is an explanation given for why they can't leave, the humans here, because they're lost and they can't be out at night because the fairies hunt at night and they don't like the sun. They're like fucking vampires. So they can't leave the forest. I get that. That makes sense. But the fairies, the only explanation for why they can't leave the forest is because they were forced underground thousands of years ago. But they could just walk out. Like, there's no magical force field preventing that. They could just walk the fuck out and then dig a hole. Like, they're afraid of the sun, walk out during the night, dig a hole, stay there during the day, get out of the hole, walk out in the night, dig more holes. It turns out there was a professor who built this building, and who built this bunker underneath the building because he's been studying the fairies. And this was highly unnecessary to even include in there. They just wanted to make him like an evil guy. He's like, he recorded himself with this webcam. He's like, sailor's log, 2009. I started construction on the bunker. I hired locals from the town nearby for fucking 5 schmeckles an hour to build it for me. And I urged them to stay out at night so they'd get mauled and killed by the fairies. Lord, forgive me for my sin. But it's like, brother, you didn't have to do that. Like, you didn't have to just have them die. Like, that's highly inefficient, because then you have to go get more workers every single time and recycle over their dead fucking corpses. Like, you would have to walk over so many bodies for that to happen. You could have just, like, had them do the work, and then had them go home before it gets dark out, and then have them come back. Like, you didn't need that. But it's things like that. Eventually he catches a fairy, and he's, like, training it like a pet. So they're watching these videos of him training the fairy, like, learning from the fairy. And then, randomly, in his last entry, he's like, I've got to kill it. I've got no choice. I'm gonna take it behind the barn and I'm gonna fucking shoot it in the heart. And then I'm gonna shoot myself. For no fucking reason. It's like he spent like 100 days with this fairy in a cage. And then he's just like, you know what, I'm tired of playing with this toy. I'm gonna kill it and then kill myself. So he does. Or so you think. So it turns out that fairy was actually a half fairy. Because thousands of years ago, fairies and humans used to fuck. And what happened is, they gave birth to halflings that live amongst us in secret. And that fairy that he captured was a halfling. One that could walk in the day. They called her the Daywalker. Her real name that she said was Arinthabuna or something. Arintha Rancor, Balrog, I don't remember. Something like that. But all of this is just like getting vomited at you all at once towards the end of the movie. It's just like an overwhelming amount of just nonsense. Anyway, the professor eventually in one of the recordings says, hey, I left the boat over there. You can just like go this direction, get on the boat and leave if you want. So they do. And while they're going there, keep in mind, they're fully aware that all of the fairies can change their shape into human beings. This fucking goober here, this absolute imbecile, as they're running towards the boat, he hears one of their friends in the forest and like struggling. He's like, John, help. I think his name is John. He's like, John, I need help. Please, please. And he's like, I'm coming. So he grabs the guy and turns out it's not John. So then he dies. And they take his shape. And then they sail into the town. And then, big plot twist, the old lady was a fairy the whole time. She was the halfling the professor kept as a pet. Because it turns out the professor had a wife. And the wife died. And the professor tried to train a halfling, or tried to train a fairy to shapeshift into his wife so he could keep fucking her. And that's who this is the whole time. It was a fairy. So like his whole thing was like, their shapeshifting abilities can bring anyone back from the dead. Which they can't. It's not resurrecting the dead. It's literally just cosplaying as the dead. It's LARPing as a dead person. So him having this galaxy brain scheme of bringing his wife back never had any water to it, like no salt, because his wife is still dead. You're then just, you have a puppet of your wife. That's it. At that point, just get a doll, right? Like, it's stupid. His plan is stupid from the beginning. And then she's mad because fairies hate humans because of what they did, which is why the Watchers watch them and, like, kill them if they break the rules. They study them and then kill them because they're mad. 1,000 years worth of bad blood and a grudge. But when old lady is confronted by Dakota Fanning in the climactic final battle, Dakota Fanning's like, I know what it's like to not feel like you belong. Because it turns out her dark and mysterious past is she got her mom killed because they were on a road trip and she was like a little brat who rolled down the window and the mom was like, can you roll up that window? And then Dakota Fanning's like, I hate you! I hate you! I hate you! I'm not rolling down the window! I'm not rolling down the window! So the mom's like, what are you doing? Why are you freaking out? And she's like, I'm gonna roll up the window myself. So the mom starts rolling up the window and Dakota Fanning's character puts her fingers out the window and gets them crushed and she's like, ah! And then the mom's like, what happened? And then she crashes into a car and dies. So she carries that guilt with her the entire time. And she, like, trauma dumps that towards the end. So then the halfling gets all of that information and Dakota Fanning's like, the professor never told you? You're half human. And she's like, no! No, I can't be! I'm so conflicted! And then she's like suffering from the revelation that she's half human, half fairy. And then her wings pop out of her butt. And then she flies away. And now she's looking for more halflings. It is. It's pretty fucking bad. It's pretty bad. But it's not nearly as bad as some of the other trash this year. But I like, there was multiple times where I did this, like I gestured this emote, because they were just making things up out of nowhere with no real payoff or build up to it. They're just like, oh yeah, end this. Oh yeah, end this. Because of that. Because I said so. Should watch a bad movie in the sub Discord with everyone. That's kind of a fire idea. But yeah, I just wanted to share that because I saw this last night. I just had to relay the information. No, I really think the Shyamalan family has great ideas. This is a cool premise for a movie. What they need, what the Shyamalan family desperately needs, is somebody to flesh out their premise better than they can. That's what they need. Like, this movie could have probably slapped.